we deep dive into the subject of track and trace, I would like to quickly take you through some of the house rules. Please ensure that your microphone is muted at all times. All the attendees can post their questions in the Q&A section, and the questions will be addressed by our speakers towards the end of their keynote sessions. The recording for the session today is going to be shared by all the registered attendees. Please feel free to share details of this event, learnings, and video clips over social media. And don't forget to tag us at Oracle and at Q&A International. If you experience any difficulties, please reach out to Varsha and she will be more than happy to assist you. For the coffee experience towards the end of the virtual event, you would have received your coffee hamper at your chosen address, and you would be needing that for the coffee session. And at the end of the virtual event, we would request you to kindly fill up the feedback form, the link for which will be available in the chat box. All right, now without any further ado, let's get started. Allow me to introduce you to our thought leaders for the day. Firstly, to welcome you all and give you a quick and robust introduction into track and trace, we have with us Ms. Baljeet Nagi, Director, SCM Sales Development and Strategy, ECE MEA at Oracle. Baljeet has extensive knowledge in the field of supply chain management, and she joined Oracle in 1997 and has worked across EMEA, APAC, and now MEA. She will then be joined by Simon Nicholson, Senior Director, Intelligent Applications Product Development at Oracle, who oversees global responsibility for the product strategy and market execution for Oracle Intelligent Application, SaaS. And now it's over to you, Baljeet.
Thank you. Okay, well, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, everybody in Saudi, and I'm sure that my face is familiar to some of you. And welcome, and it's a pleasure to be on this event again. And we've tried to make this event a bit more different to what we normally see. We've kind of given you this topic. It's a beautiful topic and a talk of the day when it comes to actually building supply chain resilience. So as you know, you must have received our hampers, and we're going to be really going to have some fun, but a lovely fun than the normal just Zoom events. So without further ado, you know, we've seen supply chains being disrupted, and this is nothing new. We've heard about companies talking about building supply chain resilience. And you know, what is supply chain resilience? It's all about making sure you have the business platform that has got the agility, flexibility, mobility, real-time information, and the security. These are all the rules that really need to be tightened up to build that supply chain resilience. But you know, supply chain resilience has got many components. And what we're going to talk about today is really Oracle's intelligent track and trace. And it's a real happening topic with what's going on in the world around us, leveraging the emerging technologies of the AI, robots, drones, etc. You know, and most importantly, the governance, you see, because regulations are so important. And we have seen that the recalls are impacting 18.4 million products, whether they are pharmaceuticals or this is food, etc. Surely we need to know, you know, what the moving parts of supply chain, which is what track and trace is. We need to have that visibility of what's happening to the products when from source to settle to fulfillment to distribution to satisfy the end customer. So without further ado, I'm going to, first of all, to set the scene for my colleague. And what we have here is really the journey that most of our customers have taken. In order to build that resilience, you need to have a cloud platform, and Oracle offers you that cloud platform, which is fully integrated with all the applications, inclusive of the emerging technologies and inclusive of what we're going to talk about, which is really track and trace. So I'm going to pass on to the real expert, who is our chap from product development, Simon Nicholson. So thank you so much. And as I said, enjoy the experience and you will just love the coffee that we have sent to you. So Simon, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baljit, and thank you for that welcome. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Just make sure that you can. Baljit or somebody, can you just confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes, Simon, all good.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, Simon Nicholson. I'm responsible for our strategy and go-to-market around the intelligent applications. I'm part of the development organization within software as a service and apps here at Oracle. And really this afternoon, over the next half an hour, what I'd like to do is just give you an introduction into intelligent track and trace. Talk about what it is, where it fits within the Oracle strategy, why now? Why is now a good time to be talking about multi-tier supply chain visibility? I'll give you a brief look at the demo, the product through a live demo, and then just a quick summary, and I don't want to get in the way of the coffee. Looking forward to seeing that. So moving forwards, I think it's important to reflect on Oracle's mission, simply because it very much talks directly to what we're doing with intelligent track and trace, or indeed any of our intelligent applications. It's about how you can actually extract more value out of the data. I mean, there is more than enough data to go around, right? I mean, we're not wanting today for data. What we're wanting for is how to make greater levels of sense from it, and then how to actually use it in ways that actually deliver value back to us, which is sort of talks very much to the discover insights, but more importantly, the possibilities that result from that effort that we put into gathering the data. And Baljit touched on this, and really everything that my organization does, which is the piece in the middle here, is the sort of, the work we're doing around technology such as IoT or AI or blockchain and many others, isn't how we sort of deliver solutions that talk specifically to IoT, but really how those technologies actually deliver value back into the 5 pillars of all of your organizations, all the way ranging from sort of customer experience all the way back around to operations and supply chain. And also how those deliver value in the areas of procurement or customer centricity, or how you become more operationally resilient, more innovative and more. And very much the intelligent applications of which I'm talking about, intelligent track and trace, actually are key points of differentiation into Oracle's supply chain solution. Now, the intelligent apps portfolio, my products are effectively, we can split them into two parts. One is the IoT intelligent applications, which has been in market now for some 5-6 years, which are a SaaS-based proposition for delivering context operationally for operational users, a SaaS-based proposition for delivering industry segment and use case specific applications for using, gathering data, extracting value, and then actually driving the appropriate action in the enterprise applications. Now, I'm sure we can come back to that another day. What I would like to talk about today is what we're doing with intelligent track and trace, and really how that sort of services across four primary areas across a sort of multi-tier supply chains, which is sort of ranging from how we track transactions all the way through to how we understand the product provenance, how we track products, and indeed how we protect from damage. Now, why is this pertinent and why now? And some of these statistics have been, maybe now 18 months, 2 years of age, but I think just as pertinent today, given everything that we've been through collectively over the last 12, 14 months, as they were, prior to that. And if we look into life science and pharmaceutical, I mean, it's been the case for some time that vaccines degrade if they're not correctly handled. And indeed, I mean, these are stats that go back a couple of years now, and incorrect handling can lead to degradation in the performance and the efficacy of a vaccine. Obviously, that's come into very sharp focus over the last 12 months. But indeed, that's been the case before. And indeed, if we look at the figure that then follows that, the cost of products exposed, cost of products where they've been exposed outside temperature range globally, it's some sort of, it's an alarming amount of cost from products that cannot be administered, cannot be used, have to be disposed of, etc., and have to be replaced. And there's also a couple of other factors that we're seeing in pharmaceutical. One is, or more broadly, I should say, one is the costs of counterfeit, the risks that emerge from use of counterfeit product. But also, if things go wrong, and unfortunately, they do. I mean, in any supply chain, there are always going to be issues. One of the factors, one of the hidden costs is that 8.6 billion that the industry is spending on doing root cause analysis to actually work out what went wrong and who was liable, in whose jurisdiction was the product at the point that the issue emerged. And we can then take that further and maybe apply that more broadly into transportation. The estimates are that there's an alarming amount of money tied up in transportation disputes daily around the globe. There's also the risk of theft. It's actually an interesting shift that increased over the last 12 months. We've seen an increasing balance shift towards theft in warehouses, but the bulk of the theft is still happening whilst in transit. And of course, we know there's potential that we can then link the risk of theft whilst in transit, but also the risk of the introduction of counterfeit product. And indeed, some 10% of units that arrive at a distribution center are showing some level of case damage, which might be indicative, especially when you start getting into high-tech goods or goods that are fragile, that need specific requirements when being handled, might be indicative of downstream needs to be replaced. And then finally, just picking up some stats in the food and beverage space, because we're seeing a lot of interest right now in that space, is notwithstanding the costs of a recall to a food manufacturer, and that's an average direct cost every time there is a recall, the amount of work that needs to be put in place to actually determine which products are affected and then effectively broaden and then wipe out that product or remove that product from the supply chain. But the most alarming statistic I see is that 56 trillion kilos of food recalled in the United States about 3 years ago. And that's not just food that can be dumped into, dropped into the dumpster out the back of the store. Obviously, that has very specific handling requirements as it's brought back and then disposed of appropriately. And there are a couple of other challenges that are affecting supply chains and driving the need for greater levels of visibility. National and international legislation changes, they have a direct effect on supply chains. I live in the UK. Obviously, over the last 12 months, we've undergone some very significant changes in the way that our supply chains work with our trading partners elsewhere across the wider part of Europe. But also there's an increasing requirement around compliance around various regulatory frameworks that are basically framed up internationally, but also nationally. For example, in the United States now, the FDA is increasingly, it was increasing the requirements, certainly in the food and beverage segment, for visibility, for manufacturers to assure visibility around the supply chains and in terms of being able to, so you can rapidly see which products are affected, check the provenance of something and take the appropriate remedial action. Now, what this brings us to across multi-tier supply chains is this notion of an opportunity. I mean, whether we're talking about over on the left there, supply chain visibility and risk, whether we're talking about how we address capacity and scale, the increasing regulations, increasing orders. And I think over the last 12 months, one of the things we very much have seen is how folks have realized that now that real-time visibility over what's going on is absolutely critical in terms of being able to move forwards. As we emerge, as one of the biggest changes, one of the biggest impacts the last 12 months has had on folks' resiliency, and they're now realizing that they need to be able to see not just what's going on in their direct tier one, but what may be going on in the tier twos, the tier threes, etc. That's not without its challenges, but certainly now there's a stronger understanding of the need to address those requirements and the opportunity that results. And really, to just sort of revisit this, I think one of the key things about any supply chain visibility solution is, first of all, that it assures the independence of all of the parties. Nobody necessarily wants to have to sort of be forced to remove their existing systems of record and replace them with somebody else's choice. We must be able to have independence from each other, autonomy, but still effectively establish this common shared record. And so it's that relationship between independence, but also transparency that is that is governing here. And then there's a link between transparency and trust. You know, how can I trust the information that I'm being given, that in some way, shape or form, it hasn't been changed in some way? And I think that then plays back to the real-time insights in that, you know, I don't necessarily want to be informed that something went wrong in 2 weeks, where I'm into remedy and I'm into having to do some form of you know, detailed investigation and forensics. I'd like to be able to know about something's going wrong as soon as possible. Let's take the example of something, maybe a high value item, high tech item that's being shipped through the supply chain, maybe a component for a critical part. You know, as a supplier, I might already have shipped that to my customer because, you know, their equipment is currently down and they're incurring costs as a result. So if in the transit process somebody drops that part, I need to know about it as soon as that happens so I can actually get another part into the process. What I don't want to have happen is for my customer to receive a broken part, try and install it, not work, you know, increasing levels of frustration to them and potentially onto their customers. And the other piece of this is as to how we establish agility and scale. If we think about the lead up in any retail environment, for example, leading up to a holiday season, you see supply chains expand dramatically as increased consumer demand, for example, is driving you know, the demand for more white goods or, you know, whatever products are in that chain. However, after the holiday period is completed, we need to be able to perhaps scale back down again. So there's that agility and scale. But the driver here with any supply chain visibility is how we establish a common shared record with that real-time insights that's visible to all appropriate parties, all the valid parties that need to see the information can do so. And we're working on some real use cases in this area right now. I'm not today going to name some customers. I'm bound by various NDAs in place. But what I can indicate is that there's a lot of activity going on in food and beverage. But if we go back to my earlier figure in terms of the volume of food recalled in the United States, that's probably not surprising. But it's also being able to target recalls rather than being able to do a blanket recall, actually being able to target and establish which specific maybe batches of chicken are impacted by, you know, maybe there's some failure in the production line, the introduction of foreign bodies into the products, you know, which specific products were actually on the line at that time, and just focusing on those. But there's also the authenticity of the product. When we're moving a product into market, the consumer, especially for very high value items, actually wants to have assurance that the product that they're buying is actually the product they think they're buying. You know, there have been multiple examples of folks who've spent a fair amount of money maybe on a product of a you know, high value product, and then they suddenly find that, you know, it is not as they think it might be. And increasingly, if I go back to the example of the US FDA, the amount of regulatory requirements now for proof that the product is entering the market is valid for that market and conforms to the standards of that market, you know, the onus of that is increasingly obviously back on the manufacturer or the importer. And so having that visibility to be able to expedite that proof is of high value. In the high-tech segment, we're also working with some companies that actually are now being driven because their brand is actually on the box. And increasingly, there's drives against high-tech electronics ending up in landfill because of the obvious environmental risks, one, that result, but also because of the impact on sustainability. So increasingly now, high-tech companies are looking at how can they actually pull product back from the market, whether it be for, you know, some form of warranty recall, whether it be because it's end of life, or maybe because the customers just stopped subscribing to that particular service, and therefore they need the box back. Take cable TV, for example, in order to be able to maybe repurpose that into another customer or dispose of in an ethical way. Similar examples in retail. Again, I've touched on these already, so I'm not going to labor the point. And also in healthcare, we're seeing an increasing amount now of activity around condition compliance, authenticity of product, you know, how we address against areas of the risks of counterfeit product, obviously a very high risk, certainly in certain parts of the world, and also how folks can now do that at scale. Obviously, the events of the last 12 months have changed a lot of what folks are seeing in healthcare. And so actually what we're also seeing is increasingly companies are now bringing forward, or authorities are bringing forward, plans that they might have had to maybe digitize their supply chain in over 3 to 5 years. They're now bringing those into the near term. We're also seeing some activity in financial areas, for example, such as IFRS 16 compliance, which is all about how you account for leases, capital leases that sit on your books, and how you get visibility, end-to-end visibility over the development of the lease, excuse me, the execution of the lease, but also the subsequent management of the lease. And then finally, related and perhaps a more of a sort of a horizontal type of discussion is around order fulfillment monitoring. I have all these orders that are out there. I want to know how they're being fulfilled. Are there any blockages? Are there any risks? Because what I'm trying to do is actually reduce the orders to cash cycle. And underpinning in each of these use cases is the product Oracle Intelligent Track and Trace. Now, I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time today going into the technicalities of the product. Certainly, we can do that in a subsequent session. But really just highlighting what the product's about. It's a software as a service targeted at business users, at operational users, and how those users will actually gather information from the network, from the multiple parties working in the supply chain, customers, manufacturers, suppliers, and so on, and how we're also gathering data from each of their systems and bringing that together into that digital thread that's shown here. So we're actually modeling business networks, tracking the entities and the documents as they evolve through the supply chain, assessing assessing the completion stage, assessing completion at each stage. For example, was there any violation of a temperature threshold when the product was shipped? I ordered 200. Did the documents marry? Did I get 200? And if those rules aren't met, actually being able to flag it and actually drive activity and drive notifications back to the users that need to see it, but also back into the systems of record. And really, we're doing this across four areas. Transaction tracking, where you have a series of documents that are effectively serving as a proxy for a service or a product, and you're looking to track those transactions as they evolve from the original maybe order all the way through to the delivery. Overlaying that, you've then got the notion of product tracking. So we're looking at understanding, the movement of a lot, the movement of batches, the movement of serial numbers, and actually being able to bring back again. And that provenance, providing a reverse lookup, if you will, back through the supply chain, back through history, and say, what checked, what happened, did it come from where I think it came from? And then finally, the protect from damage, which I'll show you shortly. So why don't we just move into a demo? And today what I'm going to do is show a very brief demo talking about targeted product recall. And the scenario here is for a company that's actually in the business of distribution of vaccines, maybe at a national scale, at a national level. So I have created a distributor called Delta, and Delta's bringing products in from various manufacturers. In this case, it's going to be coming in from one example, a company called Vision Pharma. They're using a carrier to bring that product in, but they're also bringing in some safety products as well from another carrier. And then Delta is actually then distributing the product out to local points of distribution, who in turn are then responsible for distribution of product out to the point at which it's dispensed or being used. Now, various parties are going to have various questions around this. So for example, Vision Pharma might want to know how a specific lot has been distributed. Maybe maybe there are concerns about that lot and they want to identify where it's ended up so they can actually notify the parties and maybe do a recall. Similarly, the safety products might have a similar request. Delta distributor might be wanting to know what was in a specific container, and we'll revisit that as we go through the demo. Beta distributor might be wanting to have a look at the advanced shipping notice. What other products were in the package that was shipped to me? And then finally, and we're going to start here today with General Hospital, what was the condition during transportation of a specific lot? So as I go into the demo, there are two parts to the demo. I'm going to start by showing you the view from a user. User in General Hospital has noticed something a little unusual, something doesn't quite feel right about a recently received batch of vaccine. And so, perhaps wants to do a quick lookup and see whether or not something may have happened during the shipping process or during the process that might have compromised the quality. Now, if that user establishes that, yes, maybe there is something wrong with that particular lot, well, sometimes lots get split. They have different points of arrival. They have different destinations. So it's critical that we notify or be able to identify where else that lot might have shown up and what else might have been similarly impacted. So the other parts of the supply chain can benefit from this new insight. And to drive that, I'm then going to shift to Delta Distributor, who are the founder of this supply chain. They're the folks who oversee this particular piece of the supply chain. and looking at to identify which other parts of batches may have been affected and where we're going to do a recall. So with that, I'm now going to jump. Hopefully you can see this. So here I am actually in Intelligent Track and Trace. As I mentioned, what I'm showing you is the product as you start it up. Okay. Oops. Let's have to do a new share at this point. Apologies. Let me just. There we go. I hope you can now see that. Someone can just confirm. One of my colleagues can just confirm you can see that?
Yes, Simon, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Still haven't managed to sort out how we make these sharing multiple applications over these applications more transparent. Anyway, for another day. So here I'm logged on to Intelligent Track and Trace as a user in General Hospital. It's up here in the northeast of the United States, where I'm just waving my pointer at right now. This is the view of Intelligent Track and Trace. It's a SaaS, software as a service. So when you fire it up, this is exactly what you see. Okay, so what they've done, someone's modeled the business flows, the participants, added the participants into the system, and they're now using it. And as I mentioned, someone in General Hospital has noticed that there's something wrong. So the first thing they go is they go to the notifications and they say, are there any notifications? Oh, there's some notifications out there, and it looks like there's been a temperature problem. A container threshold. Now it's critical for this vaccine that it doesn't get above 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So what I can now do is actually run a trace on this particular shipment. And here we have the shipment, the process that was followed from the original order all the way through to the receipt of the vaccine. And I can look at these various stages in this view, or I can actually go to a timeline view. And the timeline view is now actually showing me the sequence of events as they occurred, and I effectively can replay history. So here I am in General Hospital. You'll see as I start to move down through time, we're looking at a purchase order that was moving. So General Hospital maybe issued a purchase order back to a party. That resulted in some transportation activity. Now we're going to bring up some information about that transportation activity. And I can actually get a modeled chart showing me what actually happened during that transportation process. And I can see here that there's actually a point at which the data went above the threshold, the agreed threshold. It's actually gone up to, where are we? It's gone up to 1 degree. Okay, that might well be indicative. It might be indicating the risk that we're having to address. So what I want to do next, as I go through this, as I'm looking back through time, I'm now going to look at the outbound shipment. And over here, I've got a brief summary of the outbound shipment document. I can look at the bill of lading, I can look at inbound shipment and so on. As you can see, I can, as we're moving through time, we're actually watching the documents exchange and the product move backwards and forwards. But what I want to do now is look at the outbound shipment and actually find out what was the lot number of this particular shipment. And I can see here that the lot number ends, in this 10,001. Okay, I now need to find out a little bit more about that lot. So I'm now going to go and start tracking on an item. And what I'm interested in here, so we've moved from document tracking. Now I'm actually going to look at the specifics of the product tracking. And if I look at the lot, didn't quite get that. Yeah. It's 10,000. Just hit that. Here we go. There's lot 10,000, the one that ends up 10,001. I now want to have a look at that and actually look back through the timeline and the history of this. So here we have the lot. I've got a barcode, a QR code, a little bit of information about the lot. I've got a history here. And then if I scroll down, you've also got all of the documents pertaining to the movement of this lot. It's full history, it's full trace back through time. So here I am in General Hospital with the shipment that I'm dealing with today. And as I move left, you start to see that we're moving through the various stages. Here's where it was shipped, here where it was packaged, here it was received by beta distributor. So they repackaged it and then shipped it to me. They in turn received it, where are we? They received it all the way back from Delta distributor. And you'll see that the unit volumes are also changing over time. So what I can now do is I can actually say, okay, where did this come from and where is the problem? And it might well be that the problem occurred before it was received by the distributor, by say Delta distributor. So what I'm now going to do is I'm actually going to shift to Delta. I'm keeping the demo fairly brief today because time's limited, but I'm now going to move and look at what Delta Distributor can see in terms of determining where else did this lot 10,001 end up, which other parties, but also what else might be similar affected, because maybe 10,001 was shipped as within a container as part of a more aggregated shipment. So if I now, so here I am now logged on as the founder who are Delta Distributor. And if you recall, when I logged on as General Hospital, General Hospital's, the number of links that they had was fewer in number than it is for Delta Distributor. Delta Distributor, the founder, they have access. They are basically, overseeing the entirety of the supply chain and the network. But one of the things I'm interested in is understanding a little bit more about that shipment 10,001 and where it came from and what box it's up. So if I go back to the items menu a second, and obviously they've got more items listed in there than was the case for General Hospital. We go back to look at the lot a minute. Always back up. What I can now see is if I go back to the original point at which I received it, there's an outbound shipping notice here that came from Vision Pharma. So we can go all the way back. Here's where Vision Pharma created the product, and they moved that product into me as Delta Distributor, and it came in through this outbound shipping document. And in this outbound shipping document, I can see that here we go. Here's the lot, 10,001, and there's another box, and this came as a single container. And I can see that there are multiple lots packaged in various packages across this shipment. And so what I want to do now is actually look at where these lots ended up. And we can do that by examining the contents of a package. So for example, if I now go and do a quick search on the package, and let's say it starts with BX12, I can now examine the contents of each of these packages. So for example, let's look at this particular one. It's a box. There's the shape of the dimensions of the box. I can see where it's received, and I can see what the items were in the package. And here we go. Here's the vaccine, 10,001, and 10,001 ended up at General Hospital. However, there was another box in there, and if I just head back to the box, I can see that, I can see there was another lot in that same box, and that's actually ended up with Delta Distributor. That's still with me. I probably go and need to investigate further with that. And so I can now go through, I've got now full visibility in terms of not just as to where else 10,001 maybe ended up, but also what other lots might be similarly impacted, so I can actually do treatment on those as well. As I mentioned, today was a very, very brief demo. But the intent really was to just give an illustration of how within Intelligent Track and Trace, you have that visibility, and various parties have visibility pertaining to their access rights across the entirety of the supply chain network. That one, I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So really what we saw there, multi-tier visibility, the focus being cross-organizational transparency, building those trusted relationships, but also providing the currency and the transparency to enable those relationships to exist and persist. And really what we're doing, if you recall previously, we're removing that single entity authority. It's the stakeholders that authorize the transactions, the authorized parties, rather than being reliant on a single central party. Certainly removal of a lot of paper from this process and supporting very much the sort of global drive towards more digital processes, but also minimizing delays due to offline reconciliations. One of the things I didn't mention is how Intelligent Track and Trace automatically will correctly sequence the documents as they're received into the right order, irrespective of the order in which they were received. So for example, if a shipping notice arrives, gets delayed, or for some reason arrives after the product, and remember, it might be coming in through technologies such as EDI, it might arrive after the product. Doesn't matter. Oracle Intelligent Track and Trace will sequence it correctly. So you've actually got the reconciled view over what documents were received in what order. One of the other key things is that we're using a distributed ledger technology here under the hood, down in the depths. So very much providing tamper-proof audit trails. Folks cannot change documents after the point at which they're distributed or sent out. Once a document's been sent, it's that way in perpetuity. And obviously, if we're doing audit, we've then got non-reputable evidence of the sequence of activities, but also the information that was provided at each stage. And the key thing about this is connectivity, because we're not replacing the order management or the procurement systems or the ERP systems of the participants in the supply chain. We're enabling integration of taking information from those systems and also providing authentic events back to them. Now, out of the box, we also provide connectivity, built-in connectivity, with elements of Oracle's supply chain, as indicated here: order management, procurement, inventory, manufacturing, transportation management, warehouse management, and our own IoT offering, IoT fleet monitoring, as I showed, that interplay between what we're doing with track and trace and what we're doing with intelligent IoT intelligent apps. But we also enable integration with third-party systems, whether they be on-prem or indeed whether they be from another provider of ERP or supply chain capability. And we do that through Integration Cloud. And again, the integrations within Integration Cloud are there for you to use very quickly and actually get time to live very, very rapidly. So in summary, supply chains need greater levels of transparency. I think that's been the case for this has actually become very apparent over the last 12 months. And they also need to be able to work not just within inter-enterprise, but also intra-enterprise across multiple parties. And so the ability to track and trace transactions across those multiple organizations and the movement of products is paramount. It's a trusted digital audit trail, and the terms and conditions are enforced. The terms and conditions that you have your agreements with your supply chain partners, they can be enforced using the underlying rules and smart contracts. And where things don't quite marry up, you get the notifications and you can quickly establish how remedy, or indeed if necessary where liability lies. And every transaction is endorsed using digital signatures and is non-reputable. It cannot be changed. Once it's committed, it cannot be changed. So you have a full audit trail that can go back many, many months, many, many years, and so on and so forth. And with that, I've taken you through today an introduction into intelligent track and trace, shown a very brief demo highlighting some of the key capabilities. And with that, I'd like to thank you for attention. And I think at this point, I think the plan is that we open it up and see if there are any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Simon, for that wonderful presentation. I'd also now like to loop in Baljit. Thank you, Baljit, for joining us back in, and thanks to both of you for introducing our attendees to the track and trace solution from Oracle. So we do have a couple of questions coming in, and we definitely like you to address them and give more insights to our attendees. So the first question is, how can track and trace be applied to shipment on bulk vessels, and how does it make it more efficient? So Simon, would you like to go first, and then we'll have Baljit add in?
I'll give it a go. I'm not an expert on shipments and bulk vessels, but I'll certainly give you some sorts of my thoughts on this. First of all, any shipment on a bulk vessel is part of a broader process. Obviously, once the shipment arrives, it's likely that whatever the contents of that shipment are going to be, is going to be subdivided down into specific lots or batches. I mean, we're seeing similar discussions in the way that food is processed, in terms of we see bulk shipments of material coming in with a specific batch number or lot number, and then it's applied across multiple products. So it's really taking a look across the broader aspects of what's happening with that bulk product. Where did it come from? What were the elements that actually constituted that shipment? And then subsequently, what happens to it once it arrives? Baljit, I don't know, maybe you've got an enormous experience in this area, so.
No, actually, Simon, you're absolutely right. And I was answering the question in the chat. It's really exactly what you were showing in the demo. It really depends on the type of goods the vessels are carrying, and all that what you were showing on the in the demo. And plus the fact is, you see, if I may, Simon, what track and trace is also part of our emerging technologies, and we also have track and trace is complemented with IoT applications. And in this case, when we're talking about vehicles, etc., there's IoT fleet monitoring that can also be complemented and used for track and trace. So very much so. And it really depends on what use cases that you are tracking. So that's what I'll do, Simon. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the other question, before we actually get into the coffee experience, is can track and trace be integrated with an already existing ERP? So let me go the other way around first. Let's have Baljit take that up, and then Simon, you can add in your inputs.
I'm with my expert, and Simon is from product development, and we work together. And this, I remember, I don't know whether Simon, if I put Simon on the spot, this is the question that I've asked Simon so many times, and the answer that I got from Simon is, which is I'm going to repeat: as long as you have a system of records, you can position, track, and trace. Simon, over to you.
Okay. Yes, I mean, I think the one question. So the answer is yes. That is what we can't do is. Or you can't go to someone and say you're going to have to rip out your entire system and replace it just so you've got supply chain visibility. That's going to be a very short conversation. So very much the focus that we are enabling is integration with our own ERP, obviously, but also enabling, providing the means through which SI partners and partners, etc., and customers can achieve integration with what they've already got. We are even now able to take binary objects as well. So it's not just the messages that we're ingesting, but we can also take binary objects as well. So maybe you have a PDF, you want to ingest that as part and show that as part of the chain of record. Yes, that is now something we've added in the product over the last 3 months. So the one area where I get questions occasionally, sort of, all my documents are on paper. We are reliant on the information being available digitally. But other than that, hopefully that answers the question.
Absolutely great. Thank you so much. And just as the last question, as a key takeaway, which I would, of course, I would want to propose to both of you, whoever wants to go first. So just for all our attendees to know, if you would just have to put it across in a nutshell, what track and trace can do for the supply chain process in their organizations, what would it be? Just in a nutshell, if you just had to put it in one comment or one sentence. Whichever of you would like to go first.
Raji, do you want to go first?
Ladies first, Elizabeth. Well, for me, track and trace is really it's really the application which really gives you the detail, the insight, the visibility of all the moving parts, as Simon's just said. What went wrong? What is the cause, the root cause of something that's has gone wrong, has not gone right? And how do we actually, rectify that? So that's what I think, in a nutshell. What do you say, Simon?
Yeah, I think well, hopefully I've added it into the summary. We're all part of a supply chain, each and every one of us. We all have suppliers and we all have customers. And increasingly, it's critical that we know real-time visibility has become one area where many companies have struggled over the last 12 months because they've been so reliant on gathering data in batches and then sitting down and reviewing it every week, every month, whatever, and then taking corrective action. And obviously that opportunity has been removed from many companies because they haven't been able to harvest the data in the way that they used to. So I think it's that real-time visibility across the multiple tiers of the supply chain and doing so in a trusted, transparent, authenticated way is the business problem that we're solving.
Yeah, and if I just may add, Simon, we talked about building supply chain resilience and having the real-time visibility is paramount. But you see, what track and trace also does, and which is what Simon just beautifully demoed to us as well, it's all about going to the root cause and finding out the genealogy of the root cause and the serial numbers, etc. That is added visibility that you probably would not get with some of the tools which just gives you the real-time information. But this kind of track and trace really digs down the genealogy part of it, the root cause, to fix it.
All right, great, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon and Baljeet, for those amazing insights and for an amazing session on Track and Trace, the intelligent smart solution from Oracle. So thank you very much. Before we start with the coffee experience, there is a small poll that we have for our attendees here, which we'd like them to go ahead and answer. So on your screens now, I will be launching a poll which has two very simple multiple choice questions. All you need to do is just pick your answer, and that's about it. So you are going to be able to see these questions on the right-hand side of your screen under the polls tab. So I will be launching these questions now. So as you can see, the questions are live on your screen, and they're two very simple questions. So the first one is, would you like to know more about the intelligent track and trace solution that would enhance supply chain process in your organization? Yes, no. And the second question is, to get more insights on track and trace, Oracle will be organizing a workshop for the same. So would you like to be contacted? Yes, not at this time, maybe. So these are the two very simple questions. And while we have this going on, it's time for us to get into our coffee masterclass experience. So thanking Simon and Baljeet once again, and moving on is the interactive session that we have all been talking about, and we're very excited to be bringing it to you. Before I invite our coffee experience leader, Ricardo Lopez, all the way from Mexico, I'd like to share with you a few quick tips for your safety and to ensure that you have a great experience. The first point is that you would have received your coffee hamper with a cup, ground coffee powder, and an instruction card. Second point is you would be needing a French press for this experience in case you do not have a French press on hand, or if you're unable to take part in this masterclass, then you can take notes and try it out for yourself whenever you have the time and resources available. And lastly, you would need some hot water to brew the coffee. So please ensure that you're doing this in a safe and controlled environment. And you can also have sugar and milk ready, but that's completely optional. Right, so before we get into it, we have a video that we'd like for you to see. Now that you have all of the essential information that you need with regards to track and trace, we want to take you through the process of how this technology is going to aid in the coffee making process, right from plantation of coffee beans to reaching the consumers, as coffee is one of the best examples of an integrated supply chain network. So can we please have the video, right after which we will jump straight into the coffee experience. The feeling of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee is second to none. The aroma and taste that warms the soul. But have you ever thought of what it takes to deliver a perfect cup of coffee? The origin, type of coffee beans, and processes that take place behind the scenes for you to enjoy a perfect cup of coffee. With supply chain professionals like yourselves joining us today, you already know what goes behind the scenes. It is a fully integrated supply chain business process delivering that wonderful experience. So let's take you through the track and trace journey to delivering a perfect cup of coffee. Let's take you to the beautiful coffee farms of Mexico, where we will introduce you to the elaborate bean-to-cup experience. As experts in supply chain management, you know all the processes and steps that are involved before coffee is served to consumers in a cup. It involves a series of processes such as harvesting the coffee beans, processing, logistics, and distribution to the end customers. But what if the customer or retailer faces a problem with the final product? How would you go about to find out where and what the root cause is? This is where technologies such as intelligent track and trace that you have just seen presented play a vital role. Combining various technologies like blockchain, IoT, AI will help manufacturers, wholesalers, or retailers to track and trace issues and resolve in real time to deliver faster results, establish trust, and delivery for the perfect customer experience with fully integrated supply chain management. And now that you have a smart solution at hand to support you in the supply chain management process, it's now time to immerse yourself in the ultimate coffee experience. With the box of coffee goodness that was delivered to you, you will now have the opportunity to brew yourself a wonderful cup of coffee. Here's presenting Ricardo, the coffee connoisseur and your host for this exciting masterclass.
So welcome everybody to Mexico City. Woo! I'm very happy to be here with you and actually to show you the sunrise here in Mexico City. So I am in this place, in this neighborhood called San Angel. It's one of the most beautiful and emblematic neighborhoods in the city. Look at the cobblestone streets. But why we are in Mexico? So we are in Mexico because Mexico is one of the biggest producers and exporters of coffee in the world. Actually, we are number 5. So that means that coffee for our economy, it's really huge important. A lot of our GDP depends on the coffee exportations. So that also means that thousands and thousands of families depend on coffee. And here to the right, this yellow building, this is my coffee shop. So in Mexico, we have this saying that goes, my home is your home. So welcome everybody to your home. Here on the right is some street food. So this is where we are going to be doing the experience. And this over here, this is me. So very nice to meet you and welcome. I am Ricardo, all the way from Mexico. So let me first introduce myself. So I am Ricardo Lopez. I am a professional coffee taster, judge in the international coffee competitions. And I run this specialty coffee shop that I'm very proud to say is one of the most emblematic coffee shops in Mexico. So I want to tell you a little bit about my job. Now that you saw how important track and trace is, let me tell you this. One of the most complex supply chains in the world, it's coffee. In coffee, you have many people involved. The people who is planting and harvesting, people who is processing the harvest, storaging, transportation, then you have roasting, and finally it gets to the coffee shops and it needs to be prepared. So for example, in my case, my whole business depends on the quality of coffee. And let me tell you something, if all these people involved in the supply chain, if only one of them, he makes a mistake, then the coffee is not going to be that good. So let me give you just one example about my job. So I have here 2 cups of coffee, right? And this is what I do every day. I receive samples of coffee, and then as a professional coffee taster, I have a very specific protocol in order to taste coffee and register the results. So I'm gonna go to these cups, and I'm gonna take first this one. So this coffee is from a place called Guerrero in Mexico. So I taste it and I score the results. So this on the left side is a really good cup of coffee, very clean taste, very specific notes, good body, good harmony. The one on the right, this is from a place called Oaxaca in Mexico. So here I can identify a very specific defect. Something is not good in here. This cup in the right has a very strong smoky taste. So my job in the final stage of the supply chain is to identify this. And I'm gonna put a score to these coffees. And based on that score, I'm gonna tell you something. The one on the left is gonna be 10 times more expensive than the one on the right. So I identified this smoky taste. And based on my experience, I think it's because of the roasting. Something went wrong with the temperature of the roasting. But then with track and trace, I can go totally deep into that, see all the insights. And that's really, really important because by understanding what we did wrong with this cup of coffee, we can adjust. So this coffee can go all the way to a 10 times more expensive cup of coffee or batch. That's insanely important because let's say, for example, one cup of one of the best coffees in the world can be up to $75 for one cup if everybody and all the supply chain was working correctly. Perfect. So that being said, let's start preparing some coffees, okay? In order to do that, I'm gonna share first what are we gonna be looking in the cups of coffee. So please take a look on the screen. I'm gonna share this. When we assess coffee, we are looking for many qualities, but this is going to be one of the most important. So coffee is like the wine. It's going to have notes like cinnamon, blackberry, blueberry, jasmine, many options. We are going to prepare some coffees together. One of the finest coffees that we have that we send to you. And I'm going to give you a mission. Please try to identify and land your coffee in one of these categories. It can be fruity, it can be spicy, nutty cocoa. But for example, here, you have the roasted smoky one that I was talking, more like burned. So this is going to be a bad quality. So we do not want that in our coffee. Also like fermented is going to be an indicator that that coffee has something wrong. So please let's get, ideally, if you have a French press, that's gonna be better, but let's grab any coffee maker that you have and the beautiful coffee beans that we send to you. So first step is please start heating up your watcher. That's gonna be the first step. Please turn on your watcher and start heating up your watcher. And then I'm gonna give you a standard recipe. This is the recipe that we use for coffee cuppings, like professional coffee tastings. But if you want to do a bigger cup, you can just double the recipe, okay? So you are going to grab 15 grams of ground coffee, or that's the same as 2 full tablespoons. 15 grams of ground coffee or 2 tablespoons and 1 cup of really hot water. So this is going to be very important. We always do the coffee extraction below boiling point. So you need to bring your water to boiling point and then you wait until it stops boiling. So let me say that again. And if you have any questions, please use the chat. 15 grams of ground coffee or 2 full tablespoons. Then 1 cup of water below boiling point. Yeah. And you need your ideally a French press or any other coffee maker that you have at home. And please, the beautiful coffee that we sent to you. I want to do the coffee here so you can see the sunrise in Mexico. I have my French press in here. This is going to be my French press. So if you have a French press, you open this, you separate into parts, and we're going to put the coffee in here. So the very first step we are going to do is to warm up the coffee maker. That's because if the coffee maker is cold and the extraction is happening hot, that will change the flavor. So I love this because even at this stage, that seems to be very simple, we need to take a lot of care about the coffee. So my coffee shop is a specialty coffee. And that means that we take care of each of the steps in the process. And the preparation is no different. We need to warm up the coffee maker. If the coffee maker is cold and the extraction is happening hot, the crash of temperatures is going to change the flavor. This water, you throw it away. And then you're going to put inside here your 15 grams of coffee or 2 full tablespoons. Okay, perfect. So now we are ready to start the extraction. The extraction time is going to be really, really important. So please grab a stopwatch. You have one stopwatch in your phone, maybe in your smartwatch. So we are going to do extraction time of 3.5 minutes. So the very first thing, you are going to start your stopwatch, and then we are going to do something that we call the bloom. In the bloom, we get all the coffee wet with as little water as possible. And we do this to release the gases from the roasting. So you get all the coffee wet with as little water as possible to release the CO2 from the roasting, to release the gases from the roasting. That's called the bloom. The bloom is gonna last for 30 seconds, 30. When we reach 30 seconds, we are gonna keep going. Then you pour the rest of your cup of water. I like to do circle from the center to the outside. I'm gonna do circles from the center to the outside. And then I'm gonna put this thing on top. I do not press yet, I just leave it there, okay? I want to keep this warm. And be sure that this thing is not touching your coffee, because that's gonna change the flavor. So this is a perfect moment for you to start assessing the coffee. So please smell your coffee, do not get burned, and try to land it in one of the categories that I was telling you. I love this moment because a lot of the qualities of the coffee are going to be able to, you are going to be able to identify them now. So this is a moment that is going to consolidate all the hard work behind these specific coffee beans and this specific coffee powder that you have. So all the people that was working in the coffee plantation, in the coffee harvesting, processing, storage, transportation, roasting, everything is consolidated in this moment. So please smell your coffee and try to identify one of the specific categories that I gave you. Fruits, flowers, spices, chocolate caramel, nutty, maybe herbal. I hope not smoky or roasted. Okay, after 3.5 minutes, you press it. And it's very important that right after you press it, you put it into your cup. I'm gonna warm up my cup. Same reason, if the cup is cold and the coffee is hot, that will change the flavor, and then pour it into my cup. Yeah, so the water is going to be just below boiling point. I'm gonna go back to my seat, and then I'm gonna see the chat to see if there are some questions in there. Okay, so now we have a really nice cup of coffee brew. And I highly suggest that you grab a tablespoon. If you taste the coffee with a tablespoon, just as I was doing, it's going to be way easier for you to register the results. Let me look at the chat. Yes, so for the temperature, let me give you the specific temperature is going to be 95 Celsius. That's the best. But if you do not have a thermometer, you just bring your water to boiling and you wait until it stops boiling, Simon. It's very important that you wait until it stops boiling. Okay, so now we are going to grab our spoon and we are going to take a little bit of the coffee. Please do not burn yourself. It's very important that it's not very hot. I don't want you to burn yourself, please. So you grab your tablespoon and you go like this. Okay. So let me tell you, what are we looking for? We are looking for acidity. Try to identify acidity in your coffee. Sweetness. Then try to identify if acidity and sweetness are at the same level. We call that balance. Balance is going to give happiness to humans, even without being aware. When we taste something that has balance, we automatically feel happy. Then harmony. Harmony is going to mean that acidity and sweetness are happening at the same times. If you eat a grapefruit, next time you eat a grapefruit, please think about me. Acidity and sweetness and bitterness are going to be separated, not integrated. When in the mandarin, for example, acidity and sweetness, they work at the same time. That brings harmony. And harmony is going to be one of the greatest source of joy in the flavor experience. Think about this. Imagine you're listening to some people playing some musical instruments. If they are all isolated, it doesn't make sense. It's not very good. If you listen to a symphony where everything works together in a beautiful way, that's amazing. That's harmony. And exactly the same happens in flavor and in coffee. That's a really good indicator that that coffee it's really good and the supply chain was really well done. So acidity, sweetness, balance, and harmony. Then you are going to try to touch the coffee with your tongue and you are going to identify the texture. You are looking for a silky texture. The other option is grainy. You do not want grainy texture. You want silky texture, and you want high body. That's the density. So you can have low body, medium body, or high body. So you want high body. And finally, let's try to look for specific notes or hints. Basically, try to land your coffee in one of these 4 categories: fruits, flowers, spices, or chocolate caramel. So if you always try to land your coffee in one of those 4 categories, you're always going to be more aware about the flavors. Yeah? Okay, so does anybody has any questions? Please type to me any questions in the chat. Okay, so just to close the experience, I really love this notion about, at least this is something I do. Anytime I taste a cup of coffee, I can't stop thinking about all the people behind that process. So really my invitation is that from now on, you do the same. It's a really complex supply chain. Coffee is the 2nd most consumed drink in the world. And there's millions of families involved in the process. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me to host you. Let's do an international coffee cheers. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for that amazing experience. And on our platform where the whole experience was embedded, we are receiving some great feedback from the attendees. They felt really happy looking at you do the entire coffee tasting process. So I'm sure that they've had a great experience. Thank you very much. And definitely, yes, for all our attendees, please do visit Ricardo in Mexico whenever you can, so that he can give you a more in-depth analysis into what a perfect cup of coffee looks like. So thank you very much, Ricardo, once again for that amazing experience and for showing us how to make a perfect cup of coffee and how track and trace can be embedded in this supply chain process when it comes to coffee, especially. So we hope you have all enjoyed the session today. We would like to extend our gratitude once again to Baljit, Simon, and the entire team at Oracle for this amazing initiative. And a big thank you to all our attendees for joining in. And we hope to see you next time at another virtual event. But till then, take care of yourselves and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.